So what would an awesome OLED 4K TV be without an awesome player for it? Well, this is the Samsung UltraHD Blu-Ray player, UBD-K8500. It is currently one of only a handful. I think there's a Philips player on the market right now. Next month, Xbox One S will play UHD Blu-rays. But for now, this is the game, so this is what I will be unboxing here and hooking up to this. This is an LG OLED 55 BHP television. Now, tape. In the box, we have a little cover here and the player itself. Here, let's set this aside. Here's the player and wonderful foam. And it's kind of weird because it's got this curve here to it. I guess to match the curved TV that they thought everyone would like. Well, I actually paid about a little more for a little less. Well, this is a flat OLED television. It's not curved. This was actually a little bit more than the curved version. The curved version has 3D, but I don't like the curve so much that I got the flat one and lost out on 3D and paid a little bit more. But come on, the curve sucks. Stop making it. Right, but anyhow, that's what this player has. Only game in town. Take the beautiful plastic off it. Now you get your high gloss, fingerprint free until the kids get to it. UHD Blu-ray player. There's a couple outputs here. Now, important thing to note. There's two HDMI outputs here. One is for your main, which is your video output. The other one is audio only, and the reason this is in use is because some of the older, well, a lot of the older receivers that can't process the 4K signals and stuff like that won't recognize it. Well, this way you output your 4K signal to your display device using this, and you output just your audio stream to your AVR this way, and that way you can still get your Dolby True HD, all the advanced audio stuff. Just if your receiver like mine won't recognize the 4K format, you can just send it audio only and it'll recognize that just fine. I'm going to need to get a longer cable because I want to make this look nice, but the television's not completely installed yet. Here's a longer cable. And now, in here, there's probably a power adapter. See, instructions, accessory kit. I guess your power cord is an accessory. Yep, there's the power cord. Oh, interesting. Alright. Here's the remote. And here is a CR2032 button battery for your remote. How nice. An expensive battery that we'll see how long it lasts. Oh, nice. It's got a little 90-degree bend down here too. That 90-degree bend is not very nice if you have a power strip you're trying to use. Recognizes there's something on HDMI 1. Let's turn it on. does this have wired? It does. I'm just gonna set this to wired because my cable modem is right here. So I have the Ultra HD Blu-ray player all hooked up. So let's take a look at some of the functions it has other than just playing Ultra HD Blu-rays. It has a lot of the smart functions in there that you might get with a smart television. If you don't have a smart television, then this would be helpful in that it'll give you some of these features here. So here's the apps that are available for use with this Ultra HD Blu-ray player. You got the recommended apps, all the really popular ones: Netflix, YouTube, Pandora, Amazon, Hulu, Vudu, Fandango, and there's a weather one on there. There's some installed apps, and then there's also, you can go to most popular, and you can see even more of the, well, these are the most popular ones here. Let's see what's in, what's new, there we go. So there's other various things, some of the maybe lesser well known ones, and you can see them on here. And then if you go to category view, then you can see, alright, well, let's see here. So you can have games if you want to play games on your Blu-ray player. There's various sports apps, let's see, NBA, MLB, The Cube, Carbon, UFC, so, ooh, fishing. And let's see here, under lifestyle, there's a whole bunch of things under lifestyle here, it looks like. There's Sirius XM I see on there, Facebook, home shopping, and there's just, looks like 46 total here. Doesn't look like it's, here come the thumbnails. Alright, now all the little icons have loaded, so here it is again, all the little lifestyle apps, whatever that's worth. And then information, so it looks like, alright, now the information is loaded. Looks like this is mainly a whole bunch of news apps. There's a bunch of various news channels, things like that. I see History Channel on there, there's weather, some of the bigger alphabet soup networks. Education, looks like not much there, just about 8 apps here. So, a little bit there, and then for kids, 2 whole apps. There we go, yay. Alright, so there's the smart side of this. Now, the thing about, it's nice that they have these smart functions here in Ultra HD Blu-ray player, but odds are if you are using an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, you probably are hooking up to a TV that does have smart functions, but maybe you have a front projector or something like that that doesn't have all the smart features, and so it could be nice for an application like that. Or if you just have a 4K TV that isn't smart, well, then you have your smart features on the Blu-ray player. So that's pretty nice. I haven't used the functions through the Blu-ray player though, because on our television that we have, which is a LG OLED 55B6P television, it has the WebOS 3.0, which is LG's smart functions, and we've been more than pleased with that. So we've been using just the smart functions in our television, and this is essentially just a Blu-ray player or Ultra HD Blu-ray player, depending on what disc we happen to put into it for us. So we haven't used the smart functions on here, but they are there if you need that, if you have a TV that doesn't have the smart functions. Or maybe if you have a TV that does have the smart functions, but maybe these are a little bit more intuitive and easy to use than what you have on whatever your television is. As far as video quality goes, I've watched The Martian on this, and the video quality is outstanding. The high dynamic range video is really the selling point behind this. The 4K, I think, is really secondary. And that brings up the question, is this something that you'd be interested in? Well, if you have a 4K television, but it is not capable of decoding an HDR signal, I'd say, nah, you can probably do without this, because if you have a standard television, a 55, even a 65-inch television, unless you're sitting like 5 feet away from it, you're probably not going to notice much of a detail difference between a standard 1080p signal and a 4K signal. However, if you have a television that is capable of rendering a high dynamic range image, then by all means this would be a good upgrade, because I think the high dynamic range is really the bigger bang for the buck that you get out of this. Now, there is an important thing to note. There's a couple TVs out there that say they can accept I think they call them HDR ready televisions. If it's HDR ready, you really want to pay attention to the reviews for that particular television, because it means it will accept the HDR signal, but it will display it, it'll downcode it to a standard dynamic range image, so you're not really getting the benefit of HDR. You want a true HDR capable television. That would be any of the current year, I think even the last year, LG OLED monitors or OLED televisions do have the actual HDR capability. I know that there are some of the higher end LED backlit televisions out there that are capable of displaying the HDR image, but make sure that you do your homework, make sure the television is actually going to display an HDR image and not just accept that signal and then downcode it to standard dynamic range, because then it's kind of a waste of money. If you have a projector that is capable of displaying 4K content, then I would say the 4K would really be a benefit to you. On any standard television size, 55, 65, maybe even 75 inches, unless you're sitting close, you're not going to notice a detail difference. But if you have a front projection set up and a projector that is a 4K projector, then yes, you will get a benefit from that, because when you're displaying an image at 100 inches, 120 inches, maybe even larger, then yes, you are going to notice a difference going from 1080p to 4K in that home theater, that true home theater type setup. But on a standard size television, your 55, your 65 inch television, somewhere in that range, you're not really going to get that benefit from 4K. You're really going to see the benefit from having that HDR image, and that would be the selling point. But again, if your television doesn't display HDR, then I would pass on the 4K Blu-ray player, because the increase in detail you're really not going to notice unless you're sitting closer than most people sit to their televisions. So that's the unboxing and a quick little review of this. If you want to see a little bit of the video content, well, there's the review that I made for my LG OLED television, and you can pop on over to that and look at that, and that'll near the beginning of the review I did show all the images from The Martian that was displayed on the television, so you can go towards that. But now, comparing what high dynamic range versus standard dynamic range looks like, it's hard to do with a computer, especially on YouTube or with a monitor that is not HDR. Like what you're probably looking at, this is with something that is not HDR. So what I'm having to do is I'm going to be showing you a couple images, both with a long exposure and with a short exposure, and we'll compare the highlight detail and the shadow detail in each image. Here's an opening title card from The Martian. This is the sun rising behind the Martian logo, and this is a 1/10 of a second exposure on the camera. This is a high dynamic range image, and you can see the sun is a nice small point there behind the logo. Comparing it to the standard dynamic range, again, a 1/10 of a second exposure, same exposure time. You can see that the whites are completely crushed in the middle. The higher dynamic range image gives you a lot more detail within that spot where the sun's at, whereas in a standard dynamic range, all that gets crushed. Now here's a 1-second exposure from the high dynamic range version of The Martian. You can see more of the details in the shadow there, and this is a 1-second exposure from the standard dynamic range opening title card for The Martian. And just to be clear, both of these, the high dynamic range version for The Martian was taken from I was playing the HDR Blu-ray, and for the standard dynamic range images, these are all coming from the standard Blu-ray version of The Martian. Now here's a picture from the canyon as it's panning by in the beginning of the movie. This is a 1-second exposure, and this is in high dynamic range. And what you're looking at here is going to be the shadow detail that you're seeing, basically the darker areas. Now here's the standard dynamic range image. You can see that there's a lot less detail in the shadows.
all the blacks are crushed. There's just a big loss of detail there. Here's a 1/10 of a second exposure, so less light coming in, but you can see in the highlights there you have good definition in the highlights. And the standard dynamic range, you're losing a little bit of the detail there in the brights. And then here's a scene where a guy is coming out of the hatch. This is the high dynamic range version, 1 second exposure. And what we're looking at here is the details that you're going to see in the darker areas. Going to the standard dynamic range version, there's a little bit less detail in the darker areas. And then going to, this is a 1/20th of a second exposure. What we're looking at here, this is the high dynamic range version. And in the center of the hatch, you can see the brightest parts, all the detail is there. You're seeing all the detail in the deepest part where it's still really bright. Going to the standard dynamic range version, again, just like with the scene of the sun, a lot of those whites get crushed. You're losing a lot of detail there, and it's just pure white. You're not getting all that detail. So that's the difference that you're going to see with a high dynamic range versus a standard dynamic range image.
So how does HDR content look? Well, I mean, it looks really good if you're sitting as close as I am to the television, but really with HDR content, you're not really going to notice the difference over 1080p unless you're sitting about 5 feet away from your television or closer. Now, if you're sitting at normal viewing distances in most living rooms, which is like 10 or more feet away, you're not really going to see the difference between 1080p and 4K. But you will see the difference on this TV with the high dynamic range video. I mean, things are just going to pop better, you're going to have better contrast, and it's just going to look better in general. Overall, oops, all right, it's on the screensaver. All right, overall, I'm happy with it because I have a television that will really take advantage of that HDR signal. So I'm happy with the purchase, and so I don't think you can go wrong with this if you have a HDR capable television. So if this review was informative for you, please like the video, and thanks for watching.